This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight Now, we bring you a discussion on Second Global COVID Virtual Summit. The participants are Anil Wadhwa, former diplomat, and Simran Sodhi, journalist.
We will now listen in to Prime Minister Narendra Modi's speech at the second annual Global COVID Summit, where he spoke virtually. Before we go into the discussion,
the COVID pandemic continues to disrupt lives, supply chains, and test the resilience of open societies. In India, we adopted a people-centric strategy against the pandemic. We have made the highest ever allocation to our annual healthcare budget. Our vaccination program is the largest in the world. We have fully vaccinated almost 90% of the adult population and more than 50 million children. India manufactures 4 WHO-approved vaccines and has the capacity to produce 5 billion doses this year. We supplied over 200 million doses to 98 countries bilaterally and through COVAX. India has developed low-cost COVID mitigation technologies for testing, treating, and data management. We have offered these capabilities to other countries. India's Genomics Consortium has contributed significantly to the global database on the virus. I am happy to share that we will extend this network to countries in our neighborhood. In India, we extensively use our traditional medicines to supplement our fight against COVID and to boost immunity, saving countless lives. Last month, we laid the foundation of WHO Center for Traditional Medicine in India with an aim to make this age-old knowledge available to the world. Excellencies, it is clear that a coordinated global response is required to combat future health emergencies. We must build a resilient global supply chain and enable equitable access to vaccines and medicines. WTO rules, particularly TRIPS, need to be more flexible. WHO must be reformed and strengthened to build a more resilient global health security architecture. We also call for streamlining WHO's approval process for vaccines and therapeutics to keep supply chains stable and predictable. As a responsible member of the global community, India is ready to play a key role in these efforts. Thank you. Thank you very much.
That was Prime Minister Narendra Modi speaking at the second Global COVID Summit. And now we start our discussion. Today we are discussing the second Global COVID Summit, in which Prime Minister Narendra Modi also participated virtually. And the PM said that India is ready to play a key role in global efforts. And we also find that this is a summit which is bringing many of the global leaders together as the world now faces the challenge of how to deal with what we have seen as a result of the pandemic. And we have seen globally almost every nation in the globe has suffered because of the pandemic. Ambassador Wadhwa, when you see the Prime Minister's address today at the summit and the holding of this summit, how do you assess the world's reaction to a world which is emerging from the pandemic?
So I think this pandemic has thrown up many challenges, and many countries, especially in the developing world, have actually suffered a lot because of the disruption it has caused in their daily lives and the burden that it has put on their societies. What we need really is a galvanization of new actions to address the continued challenges of COVID pandemic and also to build a stronger global health security architecture. And that's why today the first session was devoted to the topic of preventing pandemic fatigue and prioritizing preparedness. As you said, some very prominent leaders around the world have been invited, and some chosen leaders were also invited to attend, and India Prime Minister Modi were one of them. And now in his address, he raised some very pertinent points because he made the point firstly that the pandemic has affected not only our daily lives but also our supply chains, and also the resilience of open societies is being tested. He made the point that India has made the highest allocation to the healthcare budget this year, and the vaccination budget is the highest in the world. He also said that India now produces 5 billion doses. This year it will produce 5 billion doses. 200 million doses have been given to 98 countries. So both through the bilateral route and the COVAX route, India has been helping other countries in the process. India also has developed low-cost testing techniques, treatment techniques, and the management of COVID data management. And this it is prepared to offer to the others. And also, he said that, in our neighborhood, India would do its best to extend this help. One important point that he made was that India also uses traditional medicines to supplement the fight against COVID. And he also said that it was important to have an equitable access to the medicines. So in that context, two important issues were raised. One was that the WTO rules, should allow for local production of vaccines because it is bound by rules which do not allow this at the moment, and India and some developing countries have raised this issue in the WTO. He also raised the point that the WHO needs to be reformed, and there has to be a resilient security architecture for health around the world. Then again, for vaccines to keep the supply chains flowing, it's important that WHO can change itself, can transform itself. So all in all, a very comprehensive speech in the short period of time that was allocated to him.
Mr. Wadhwa, as you also pointed out, the PM made some very important points, and two of the things that you mentioned that the PM spoke. One was that India would want to extend this help to in the neighborhood. And we also saw that during the COVID crisis, India did extend what we have called as the vaccine Maitri. India helped out all its neighbors in the supply of the vaccine. And as the Prime Minister pointed out, India has supplied 200 million doses to 98 nations. Do you feel that the negative aspects of the COVID pandemic at one side, we also see that this was a moment where India actually rose to a point where it showed that it is actually a global player today? Also in the sense because India was willing to share whatever it had with its neighbors and with the world generally. And that helps India in its global stature, and it also helps the PM the way he has reached out to the other countries of the world.
It definitely goes to show that India's importance in the world as far as the fight against pandemic has grown because of its capacity to manufacture vaccines on a large scale. In fact, it's played a very key role in the ongoing efforts, global efforts to combat the pandemic by supplying safe and affordable vaccines and medicines, and also, as I said, development of low-cost indigenous technologies to test and treat, and the genomic surveillance as well, and capacity building for the healthcare workers. In fact, it's engaged very continuously with the multilateral fora with the objective of strengthening and reforming the global health security architecture with WTO as its center. So these efforts have, of course, been focused on friendly countries, but importantly, as you mentioned, on the neighborhood first, because there the neighborhood depends a lot on what India has to offer. And, the capacity of India to produce these vaccines will come in handy. Its experience in handling the pandemic for such a large population will also be very important for the countries with whom India has been in touch with. Many countries and governments, going forward, would have to invest very heavily in building the infrastructure and also, investing in training scientists who can develop efficient and affordable vaccines more quickly. and countries like India can help a lot in this respect.
Mr. Vadra, we also see that when the pandemic was going on and there was a lot of research which was ongoing on the various medicines, on the various vaccines that could come out, we also saw a lot of argument over the intellectual property rights. We also saw this huge division between the developed countries of the world and the underdeveloped or the poorer countries of the world. Do you feel, especially as the PM has also pointed out, one, that India is now ready to play a key role in global efforts? He's also called on WHO. Do you feel that this is now the time when the countries of the world can come together and maybe figure out a way where the vaccines are available more quickly and what we have the intellectual property rights? That issue can maybe be resolved in a more humanitarian fashion.
So I think India has been at the forefront of moving this resolution in the WTO for the waiver of intellectual property, not only with respect to vaccines, but also, the related equipments and medicaments, etc. Now, what has happened there is that the WTO seems to be in an impasse by itself because of the very nature of its working. And, there is a big lobby of interested vaccine manufacturers around the world who would not like to part with this easily, and therefore they put pressure on their governments not to do so. But today, in most of Africa, only less than 20% of this population has received one dose of the vaccine. In the remaining few, less than 35% have received one dose, as per latest data which is coming on May 11th. And it's just that COVID vaccines have been developed remarkably quickly, and it has also been a matter of luck because the coronavirus has already caused a lot of other difficult diseases. So it's a familiar kind of pathogen. So the countries around the world like India have been able to develop this vaccine very quickly. However, for the countries in Africa and in other less developed parts of the world, countries will have to work together to waive the intellectual property rights. Otherwise, this access to vaccines would not come very easily. So, unfortunately, this is something which many countries have raised, but so far the developed world, under pressure from the important lobbies in the developed world, have not been able to achieve a breakthrough.
Mr. Vadla, we also saw the PM talk of traditional medicine, and that is something in India we have been developing a lot, and we also see that India's own cultural heritage also provides solutions to many of the world's problems. We have in India Ayurveda, we have other traditional forms of medicine. Do you feel that this is also the right time for India now to take what has been culturally our traditional medicines to a global forum today?
Yes, absolutely. And I think whenever the opportunity arises, the Indian government has been pushing through the Ayush Ministry to have the traditional Indian system of medicines approved, all around the world. It has also been talking about traditional medicine from India in its bilateral free trade agreements that it's signing with different countries. Again, in the context of Australia, for instance, in the ECTA, which has just been signed, this issue was discussed extensively. Going forward, I'm certain that many countries in the world would like to adopt Indian traditional medicine as an alternative. A, because it has no harmful side effects. B, because it is easily available. And 3, because it is a traditional form of medicine which has its proven efficacy through the centuries. So I think India would be popularizing the traditional medicine that we have because there is a wealth of knowledge that has been developed, and we need to develop that much more and take it to many parts of the world.
And in the coming days, we will continue our discussions on the challenges facing the world as it emerges out of the COVID pandemic. Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on Second Global COVID Virtual Summit. The participants were Anil Wadhwa, former diplomat, and Simran Sodhi, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel News on AIR Official. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.